I am so glad to see that there are people, as many people here as there are, because you hate networking as much as I do. And as I am sitting right now and talking to all of you, deep down inside, my stomach is going like this and it's clenching because I'm naturally an introvert. And I figured that this would be a great panel for people who feel like I do. And whenever you're forced to actually go to either an organization, like a business convention or some other kind of networking event, and you walk in there with that dreaded feeling of, oh my God, I don't know anyone here, and I'm going to have to now talk to people about things that I don't care about, and they're probably going to forget who I am 5 minutes later because I'm going to forget who they are. And I figured that this would be a great panel for me to talk to and lead because I'm one of you guys. Trust me on that one. And speaking of who I am, my name is Adriana Collada Hudak. I am I think really the only white-collar criminal defense attorney here at the firm, and my practice kind of speaks for itself. I'm the lawyer that you hope to never have to call, because if you do, the feds are on your tail for something, and you are in desperate need of help. But if you do need me, that's what I do. That's who I am. But that being said, we're not here to talk about me. And thankfully, we're not, because Maria is way more interesting than I am, and the reason that she's the perfect panelist here today is because she is, I think, as Esther said very appropriately, she is a powerhouse. She knows how to meet people. She knows how to project herself. She knows how to market herself. She has an amazing career, and hopefully, after getting to know a little bit more about her tips, you're going to like networking a little bit more. So let me tell you a little bit about Maria, and I'll tell you a little bit about our office as well briefly. Greenspoon Marder, we are a full-service law firm. We are kind of, I think we started off in Florida. We've kind of expanded all over the country since then, and pretty much any kind of service that you need, we can help you. Whether it's me, hopefully never me, but yes, me, or any of our other lawyers. We do civil, we do real estate, we do estate planning, civil litigation, business consultation. We have a great cannabis group here as well. So we basically can help you with pretty much any of your legal needs. But again, let's switch the spotlight from me and the firm over to Maria here. And this I do need to read off my script because she is so darn accomplished and I have a terrible memory. So here we go. So Maria Garcia Berry is the founder and chairman of the board for CRL Associates. In 1981, she launched the firm in Denver, and she established that firm with a commitment to strategic, effective, and insightful governmental public affairs. So today, CRL Associates is one of the leading governmental public affairs companies in the country. Maria is well known for her ability to navigate complex issues regarding rapidly evolving economies in which we work. She's fantastic at finding productive solutions that benefit both parties, which is actually one of the great things about networking and one of the keys to networking, which we're going to talk about later on. She is a native of Matanzas, Cuba, and she came to the United States back in 1961 as part of Operation Pedro Pan. She has a personal passion for mentorship, for entrepreneurship, I can't speak today, in both Denver and in Cuba. She is highly active in Cuban American communities in Colorado and nationally. And again, this is part of the reason why she is such a fantastic addition to today's program, because she has a great ability to connect not only with the local community in Denver, but she also crosses that space into the Latin and Hispanic market, which is so important and such a growing part of our society today. So Maria believes strongly in civic involvement. Over the last 4 decades, she has served on numerous boards and commissions, including for the Metropolitan State University, the Board of Trustees for the Auraria Higher Education, and is a founding member of the Latino Leadership Institute. She is currently serving as chairwoman of the Biennial of the Americas, a member of the Second Judicial Nominating Committee, the Capitol Building Advisory Committee, the C12 Foundation, the Cuba Study Group, and Opera Colorado. Maria, how do you have time to even be with us today, for God's sake? And last but not least, she has received numerous awards and recognitions, the most recent being the Denver Business Journal's Lifetime Achievement Award, which was given to her in August of 2023. Give it up for Maria, please. That was a good. So Maria, again, welcome. And I'm going to start today's questioning with hopefully some softball questions for you. So let's start with, what are some of the common misconceptions about networking that we as introverted people who hate networking, that we need to let go of?
Can you guys hear me? Is this on? Okay, great. I can't tell, it doesn't echo. Well, I think it's important. First of all, I'm the opposite of you. I am an extrovert. I like meeting people. I like getting to know people from all walks of life. I used to be the one in high school that never belonged to one clique because I wanted to belong to all the cliques. Because they're more interesting, right? It was boring to have lunch with the same girls all the time, or the same, guys or whatever. So I am the opposite in that aspect, but I think it's important. Networking has become a thing. I want to tell you a little vignette from 2019. There's an individual in Colorado by the name of Jamie Van Leuven who is very civic-minded, very entrepreneurship oriented, and he has been running the Livingston Institute in Africa, in actually Uganda. And every year he does a little women's leadership conference. And he asked me to show up and be their speaker. And it's really fascinating. If you've never been to Uganda, Rwanda, I highly recommend it. It's really fascinating. But it's all about trying to cultivate entrepreneurship among women in Africa, particularly with the challenges they have as being able to, usually, if they're the part of the third family, they may not get to go to school. What do they do if they're inherently very smart and have a skill set? How do they develop it? So we all broke up into groups, and the number one thing they all wanted to know, because they thought there was a secret recipe for it, was they all looked at us and said, okay, we need to learn about networking. Networking. What is networking? Don't worry about it. I think it's become a much more of a bigger thing. To me, networking is all about relationship building and expanding your ability to know people from all walks of life. I think it's really important, and all of you, I presume, are entrepreneurs in some way, or trying to be entrepreneurs, or trying to start a new business, or do whatever. I'm a big fan of tech. I happen to be a very tiny LP in two tech funds, one of them which is woman-owned and women-run. And so I think that it really is about relationship building. And what I do, I'm in governmental relations, okay? I can tell you countless opportunities that got presented because I got put in a meeting with someone, not in a meeting, in a social event or in a civic function, where I actually met somebody who somehow we connected. Okay, and in that connection, we created a mutual kindred spirit type, and we're able to break through barriers. One of the challenges in the world that I live in is, politics are black or white. Either you're with me or you're against me or you're whatever. And the art for me, okay, is how do you break all through that and try to find a solution to a really hard problem.
Actually, Maria, this is perfect, because this is one of the things that I've thought about when I actually head out for my own networking ventures, and often, think, oh my God, how am I going to create that relationship? So I think this is a good question to ask. How do you break the ice, and what do you do to try to find common ground with the person that you're speaking with to foster that relationship?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think you have to be really interested in the other person you're talking to. Okay, if it's about talking about you, that's really boring. Sorry. I find her listening to reading my bio was a bit painful. It's, in the sense that it's really about making that connection with the other person. And usually, it depends how the networking occurs. It could occur at a cocktail party. It could occur. I do a lot of walk and talk meetings. I learned those during the pandemic because I am an extrovert and I was going crazy. And if I didn't have my friends and to go outside and we could walk outside, I would be like not doing really well right now. So how do you get those conversations going and you learn more about another human being as to what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve or what their challenges are, okay? So I think number one, ask about them first before you volunteer. I have a friend who my joke is I can set a clock by how many times in the first 1 minute they mention the fact that they're a graduate of Harvard University. You know?
Insert eye roll.
Yeah, yeah, right. Insert eye roll. That's not very interesting. And so what is really interesting is what makes the commonality of creating the connection, and genuinely asking a question that's of interest, to that person about who they are, and it's not like, oh, what do you do? How many kids do you have? Whatever. It's trying to break through and asking a genuine, authentic question about what they really are interested in, aside from, a lot of us are working or doing whatever, but what really gives you joy. I don't know if you guys have heard of the writer by the name of Arthur Brooks. He and Oprah Winfrey just released a book about how to achieve a better life. And he actually teaches a class at Harvard. He's got a very eclectic resume. Trust me, he started out as a French hornist and then ultimately got a PhD and is now teaching a course on happiness, on how to be happy. At Harvard University's most demand course is about happiness, right? And it was very interesting to talk about how his enjoyment it's not about pleasure, it's not about instant gratification. It's about really getting to know another person for what they are. And I think that's what we break through. I think one of the myths of networking is, okay, I'm gonna go network, I'm gonna go work this crowd, and I'm gonna come up with 6 new opportunities for me to either get employed or have a contract or do whatever. It doesn't happen that magically. I also would tell you that I think networking at times, if it's not substantive, it doesn't work. I know a couple of people, we'll rename nameless in this town, who are experts at giving you their QR code right away or their business card and following up with all kinds of things, but they just want to amass contacts. They don't want to really get to know me as a person, so that's not very motivating.
So here's an interesting question. I'm going to spin off of that. What happens when you are talking to somebody, you initiate the conversation, let's say you reach out to them and you say, hey, so what do you like to do on the weekend when you're not at this event? You start things going. But let's say that the connection, the personal connection, isn't really there. And that's going to happen. I mean, we're people. Some people that you're going to hit it off with, others you're not going to find, common ground with. So then at that point, what do you do? Like, what's a graceful exit?
I think you gracefully say, thank you so much for talking, and you move on to the next person. I think if you don't have an immediate connection, don't belabor it.
Yeah,
don't force it, okay? Because it's not going to be productive for you, and it's certainly not going to be productive for them. And there may be a lot of other people to talk to and to do whatever.
Okay, so let's say you've made the magical connection. You've connected with 1 or 2 people that you have some common ground with. There's some kind of chemistry, personal chemistry. What is a good way to then follow up and start to maybe build that relationship?
Okay, you guys are all going to laugh. But I'm a big believer in handwritten notes. I'm a big believer in if you really want to connect with someone, how many people really get snail mail these days? That is not a forced letter that is written by somebody who's doing whatever. I have found through the years that if I really want to connect with somebody, I may drop them a note. It's brief. It's not a big deal. And just actually say, let's get together. I know people text a lot, and we do everything, right? In terms of all through the internet stuff. But I find if I really want to make a connection, the fact that I took the time to actually write down something, not while I was, doing something else, texting, waiting for a meeting or something like that, but that I actually took down the time, I actually speaks volumes. But I know a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people don't know how to write cursive these days. So I have a nephew who, when I gave him a card for his graduation, freaked out because he went, oh my God, nobody taught me how to read this. Which is like, okay. But anyway, it's little things that sort of separate you. Yeah. From whatever. One of the things that I find most annoying is when you meet somebody right away and then they besiege you for days on texting, wanting to get together. And I think there needs to be a cadence to that, because we all have to respect that everybody has responsibilities in their lives. And I think there's a time of being too pushy and a time of not being responsive enough. And that's a timing that your gut has to tell you. You have to trust your gut on that one, right? That's why, a lot of people start saying, well, I've been ghosted. Right? And, if somebody doesn't respond, then they don't respond. Go on and develop. It may come back to to ultimately reconnect, but there may be other things going on in their lives.
Right.
And I think sometimes, social media and all the ability for us to respond so quickly, demanding somebody to respond right away, I think personally is a mistake. It's a burden you're putting on somebody else who you just met.
No, that's a good point. And I also will say that one of the things, and Maria, you tell me how you feel about this. So one of the things that I've thought about as far as a follow-up, hey, listen, I'd love to grab coffee. Can I take you out for some coffee? A quick drink, a quick bite? Because at least I kind of feel that at this point, it's still early in the relationship, and you kind of still want to, kind of like not commit to the whole date, so to speak. So then I figure coffee is like a quick in and out. And it's maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. And then at that point, hopefully you've got some other things to talk about. What do you think about that approach?
I think that's a great idea. I ask people to go for a walk.
Yeah.
I think people, it's interesting when when my kids were young, I used to call, it's windshield time. Kids tell you amazing things when they're not staring at you, right? You're driving them to work, are you driving them to school, and they're not looking at you, so they'll do it. It's interesting, I think that the magic of walking is that people tell you some things that they normally would not tell you sitting across a room for you. Now, that may take too much time. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be a long walk. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go do a 14er, right? You can just go do a walk in Wash Park and spend some time, and then maybe have some coffee. Those are, I think, some of the most productive connections that I've made.
Yeah. And how quickly do you go from starting off and building that commonality to then getting to the point where you then ask that person, or as I like to say, you make the ask. Hey, listen, Maria, I've heard so much about your contacts. I would love to meet this person that you know. Like, how do you bridge that gap?
Well, I think if I understand your question, I mean, it depends what the connection was made about. Mm-hmm. I have had crazy opportunities that have been presented themselves in a social setting where all of a sudden I have a really big client. He didn't know he had a problem. And we started talking at a cocktail party. I have a lot of stories of solving problems over cocktail napkins, right? That you kind of sort of think it through, and it worked out. So it depending on the urgency of how that conversation happened. If it is in fact a conversation about a business issue that has some urgency to it or some time sensitivity, then I think you can follow up right away and actually refer to that, okay? If it's more of I need to get to know you because, we don't know where this relationship is going and how maybe we can, particularly in what I do, we have we have competition, but we tend to also work a lot together with a lot of consultants. So how do we look for opportunities, right, to work together or to do something together in that aspect? It really depends whether the relationship, the networking came across as work-related or whether it came across as a social setting related, where may develop to ultimately do some work together.
So that's a good question. Let me just, by show of hands, how many of you here are entrepreneurs who are looking to hopefully make connections to offer your service to a greater range of people? Okay.
Or to find a funder.
Yes, that's true. To find a funder. Who needs money here besides me?
Yeah. It's interesting.
So then I guess that's a good question, because if you're meeting somebody, and the goal of networking usually, and I think as many people kind of get it, is you network with others in the hopes that you're going to like someone, you're going to build a relationship, and then that person will either refer business to you or be instrumental in helping you grow your business in some other way. So I'll do the first part. If you're hoping to make a connection with somebody who can then help you either market yourself or send clients your way, do you have any thoughts about approaches that person can use to build a relationship and hopefully get that?
I think depends whether you're trying to sell a service or you're trying to look how, let me give you an example. I'm a limited partner in Hannah Gray, which is a venture fund on tech, run by women, and a lot of the entities that we invest in are in fact products that are very female-centric. If anybody has heard, the women in the room, if you've ever heard of Billy, the shaver, we were one of the first angel money in Billy through the fund, and it's now owned by Gillette. They're big. So anyway, I think one of the things, like for example, that I've created relationships is to listen to the entrepreneur and how, if I'm intrigued by what they do, right, how I could help them think differently as to what other services or who else they should go talk to expand their services. So it really depends. It's whether, if somebody's pitching me a service where I'm actually going to pay money to, versus if somebody's talking to me as to whether, who else should they be talking to? How to expand their own network? What others, if I know what their application is, how can I help them expand their world and see what other avenues they have for development? So those are two sort of very different, components on it, but all very valuable.
And how do you feel, for example, about did you ever have somebody in your career who was kind of like a mentor to you, who helped you network and get to know other people and expand your business?
I've had a freaking village. I mean, my business is going to be 42 years old in December. I started it with a whole whopping $2,000 in my rented little tiny apartment in Capitol Hill. Didn't know what the hell I was getting into. And I've had all kinds of mentors all through, even before I started my own business.
And which do you feel, what type of mentor would you feel, if there is such a thing, would be best in terms of helping you grow or start a new business venture?
Somebody who tells me what I don't want to hear. And who tells me not somebody who's a downer, because they're the people who will tell you some things and it just depresses you. Right. They're people who want to help you, okay, but they're going to tell you what life is all about and how hard it is to do X and Y, or why I'm thinking wrong. For example, for me, for a long time, we never had a banking relationship. Because I thought bankers were never going to, well, there's a real story for that, because I actually was introduced to a banker early on in my business career, and the guy, they all came in and we shared our financials. We were a tiny little, we're still a small business, but we're a productive small business with a good return. But at that point, we were pretty small. And the guy looked at me and said, oh, yes, we've gone through everything. You have a very nice hobby here. I walked out of the room. Okay? I'm like, okay, if you think my business is a hobby, okay, then I obviously should not be doing business with you, right? So for a long time, I was terrified about creating a banking relationship because I thought they were going to make judgment calls on me, right? That I was making decisions that they weren't going to approve of. No, I don't have an MBA, and I'm not a lawyer, okay? And so how am I going to defend myself? Fortunately, there was a partner that came in who was a commercial banker who taught me there was a different way of looking at it, but it took me a while. So that's sort of the things that sometimes you have to have, because you need to have somebody who can mentor you to say, okay, I'm going to hold your hand through this. You're not going to like some things, but you're going to get through it.
And how do you find that mentor? Where do you think are places to find a mentor? Now here come the tough questions.
Yeah, here comes the tough questions. I think a mentor can be anybody who is, first of all, it depends what you need it for. If you are lacking self-confidence, it's maybe somebody who's a close friend who knows you really well. If it's someone who you really need business help with, but you're embarrassed, in my thought, a long time I was embarrassed to go say, I don't know what they're asking me to do. How am I going to create a P&L that makes sense to anybody? Because I'm not sure I know how to do it, right? And you don't want to be embarrassed. You go look for that person who is not a competitor, who likes you, okay, who has faith in you, and who's willing to spend some time with you to be able to do that. And that could be, somebody's friend or father or uncle or sister or whatever. And sometimes some of the best relationships we've had are people who were offshoots related to employees that we had or who we talked to. Tech's a big bane for us for a long time because of what we did. We didn't want to have a website because we thought that it's a delicate balance when you're in public decision making, because I lobby elected officials. They're the ones making decisions, not us. And a lot of our competitors were doing all these things. Well, I'm doing all these things. Yeah, no, you didn't vote. You weren't elected here, right? So for a long time. And so we found somebody who really walked us through. We found a small firm who specialized in small business, and I got to know the woman, and she helped us walk through what it is when we had a web presence, how to do it in a way that felt comfortable for us, you know. So that was that was a thing, because everybody kept saying, "My God, you don't have a website. Well, who are you? Are you some, you know, fly-by-night operation or something like that?" So.
And you touched on something that I think is also very important as an aside here. The having people who are yes people around you, I think, is a very dangerous proposition. And these people can be friends, they can be relatives, they can be colleagues, coworkers, and obviously a lot of them come from like a good place. They don't want to hurt your feelings. They want to be, you know, they want to be seen as a good person who's kind of helping you along. But having yes people, I think, is very dangerous, because with yes people, you don't improve. You don't challenge yourself. You need to have somebody who's going to tell you, you know, for example, when I started, and this is obviously a very different career. I mean, legal and Maria's endeavors are kind of like, I think, operate in very different worlds. We have very different writings.
Oh, but I practice law all the time. Trust me.
Don't tell the
In the world that I do, I have to worry about the law.
So, for example, when I started off as a young lawyer, I would write memos, I would write motions for the court, and you know, there are certain people that I would show them to, and no matter what I did, "Oh my God, this is great, Adrienne. This is fantastic. I love it." And I'd be like, "Well, that's awesome, great, but is it really?" And then I would turn around and, you know, go to someone else who might give me more constructive criticism. And I always learned more from those people, the ones who were able to tell you, "No, listen, this is not convincing. You got to switch this. You got to switch that. And hey, did you see this case? Did you miss this case? Because you got to look at this." So you definitely want to be very wary of having the constant yes people around you. And you also touched on something else, Maria, which caught my attention, which is how can you, mining your close contacts, your friends, the people you already know in your life, to help you also grow and expand your business and perhaps connect you with others who can help. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, you know, it depends on whether your business is a volume business, right? Or whether, like with us, we don't have a lot of staff. We have 52 clients in the firm, which is not insignificant, but we only have 9 people. But it takes a while. We're not necessarily a volume business, and we won't take every client. We also have to worry about conflicts. Not as intense as lawyers do, but we do have to worry about conflicts. So I think what you have to do is, I think associations are really important. I'm a big believer. We've always belonged to the partnership. One of my partners has been on the board and on the management committee. We've always gotten involved in, because we do so much real estate work, have been a member of the Urban Land Institute, which is the ultimate networking organization nationwide in terms of the real estate industry. That is really the Ford leader of the able to do that. There's a very active Colorado ULI here. Get yourself involved. Don't pick every organization in the world. I would curate my, I know some people hate that word, but I like it, my involvement to 1 or 2 that are maybe you think is more aligned with where your business is going, and what you think you need to do. Real estate was very much, I mean, most of the people that we listened to were developers or financiers or bankers or whatever, but there was always a niche that we found ourselves. Some of my biggest clients came out of a ULI conference. And it really was over cocktails and cocktail napkin, because they had a project in Denver. So we got to build relationships and learning how to know which organizations to become involved in. Particularly if you're a busy entrepreneur starting a business, you have limited time. And so I would not go to everything, but I would experiment with a couple of organizations and see where you feel the most comfortable and where you think you can actually get some interest in your business and create your network to grow business. With us, we're in a very political environment, so there's a big world out there that we have, but we also need to learn how to manage it, and where we spend most of our time working on appropriate associations versus trying to cover everything.
Okay. And I'm going to now open it up a little bit to our audience, because I think we've touched on a lot of things, kind of like as far as the basics of networking, and I actually really do agree with you in the sense that you can't go to every event. You don't want to go to every event. I think that, and please chime in on this, with your thoughts too, I've come to the conclusion that our time is scarce and it's the most important resource that we have. So I think one of the things that I think about now when I'm networking is, what is the purpose of this relationship? What am I hoping to do? Who am I hoping to meet? and why am I hoping to meet that person? And I tailor my events and the things that I go to for that, to that purpose. Is that something that you have also done in
Yep,
your own career?
absolutely. And I also, like in our firm, we also mature out of associations.
Right.
I would be involved early on certain associations. I feel it's really important that some of our, it's not about me, it's about the firm, and so that other people create, that relationship and that own network on their own right. Yes, I have a big network. I've been around, my business is 42 years old, but at some point, I'm going to do something else. And my team has to develop their own networks. My joke is, for a while, when I hire young people, is I don't check on anything, but I check on their expenses. Not because of, not about if they, not how much they spent, but if they didn't turn in any expenses, that tells me they're going nowhere. That they're not doing anything, they're not getting out of their comfort zone, they're not going out and venturing and introducing themselves to people and getting to know, because it's also about getting to know your community, right? If your company's going to be based in wherever you're going to be based, getting to know the fabric of your community, I think, is really important to grow your business.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. And it's actually one of the reasons it's kind of personally applicable to me, because I am not a native Coloradan. I'm not a native Denverite. I actually grew up in Florida. And about 2-3 years ago at the beginning, when the pandemic started going, I said, you know what, I've been wanting to get out of Florida for the longest time. And I've been wanting to come to Colorado because, it was really more of a lifestyle change than anything else. I just happen to be a mountain person, an outdoor person, and where better in the country to do it than right here. And I was very lucky that my firm essentially said, hey, Adriana, yeah, sure, you can work out of our Denver office. As long as you can make it happen, we don't care where you are. So I've kind of had to start here from scratch in terms of building my own relationships, my own contacts, my own networking. And in what I do, I'm always, quote unquote, hustling. Thankfully, hopefully, my clients are not going to be repeat clients. Not everybody's going to get indicted every so often, every few months. I have jokes I could make about that, but I'm just going to leave that out of this conversation altogether. And that being said, I can tell you that, when you start off, and as I've had to start off here, I kind of had to look again, what are the organizations that I want to belong to? Why do I want to belong to them? Do I want to establish a certain amount of professional credibility here? Can I take some of that from Florida, transfer it over here? If not, where can I start and who can I start with? So with that being said, and unless you have something else you'd like to add, I'm going to open up the floor and let you ask questions, and let's roll with it. So if you've got questions, shoot them up at us. I'm going to start with the back, right there with the gentleman, green shirt.
Go back to what you were talking about, finding a mentor. I think they kind of pivoted away from it, and I'd love to circle back to that and just get your perspective on how to find that right person, especially not a friend or close colleague already, but looking someone specifically to mentor you on your journey.
Right. So a couple of things. Sometimes I've gone back to professors that I wanted to consult with, or consultants who have retired. That's actually been one of my best. As I've transitioned my company into adding partners and how I did it, one of my then competitors, who's now long retired, became a good mentor as to how to do it and how to not to do it, because he walked me through the mistakes they made, right, and be able to do that. Because I think one of the things you learn the most from is learning from other people who have made mistakes and are willing to tell you about it. A lot of people say, well, I never made any mistakes, right? But a lot of us have. So I think sometimes looking at that, I would have never felt comfortable talking to him when he was an active competitor, right? But now that he was retired, and we were friends for a long time, and we always had a good competition with each other, but he gave me a lot of good advice and reached out, and we get together every 3 months and we catch up, and he's doing something totally different, and we do that. So those are some of the ways you have to think through who could really help you and what you needed help with.
Do you know of an AARP for executives?
There is a I think it's called 60 Plus, or an organization like that has those kinds of, they'll bring in an executive for a couple of weeks or to do that. Some people create mentorship relationships. all the business schools are starting to do that. University of Colorado, Denver actually actually DU's also done it, of people who are transitioning from one career to another, okay? And they are creating an infrastructure that allows people to come in and try to do that. So I can, I don't know who, we can connect and give you information as to where you do that, because because of the fact that the demographics of the population are changing and people are transitioning so much, okay, a lot of the universities are starting to do that kind of consulting entrepreneurship work. Does that help?
And that's actually a really good point. Going back to, if you have an alma mater, a university that you graduated from, going back to their counseling or resource department might actually be a good source to point you in the right direction. A lot of alumni like to mentor and like to be involved with, with future colleagues, new students coming in, and that could also be a really good source.
Yep.
So. All right, I'm going to do, this is so awesome. I feel like Oprah going into the crowd here. So I'm sorry, I'm going to go back again. We have another question here. Hold on, I'm going to give you the mic so people can actually hear your question. Here you go.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for doing this. In some of the discussion earlier, there's a lot of talk about how do I find a network that can give me this, and what can I get out of, and who could be the right person. My question is, what should you be giving your network?
That's exactly right. That's
Cultivate it, to grow it, to keep it strong in a world of ghosting and distractions. How do you make yourself stand out as someone that everybody wants to keep in touch with?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and thank you for bringing that up. I actually think that's your approach you ought to be. When you walk into a situation where you're networking, it should be, what can I contribute to this? What do I glean in? Let's face it, you always feel better about yourself when you're contributing versus when you're taking. And to be able to do that. So one of the things I do, for example, is I like to help, particularly in my world, there's quite a few companies that have started and are thriving because I sat down a long time with them and said, I really want to help you because I think you should do your own business, or you should do X and you should do Y, right? And I found little ways where I can contribute, whether it's giving them a lead. I just had a conversation with someone today somebody called my husband, an attorney looking for a communications crisis management person. That is not what we do, okay? I immediately got on the phone to this young woman who has started her business and said, don't know the details, don't know where you're going, but will you be able to hook up? I think it's using your network to make. What I think I do best is connect people. Yep. So it's not about me, but it's giving you a connection to somebody else, okay, to be able to maybe get whatever you need, whether it's assistance, relationship, whatever. That's what I think I do. So I thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is exactly the essence of the attitude you should be taking in doing this.
Thank you. That is a great question. I'd say if you cannot make the connection, good old cup of coffee. Hey, let me take you to lunch. You've been a fantastic resource for me. You've been a great help. Let me take you to dinner. Let's go to a game. Something like whatever feels natural to you as a thank you, something that's genuine, and I think that would go a long way as well.
And let me just add one thing. Some people feel proprietary about their network. I don't. Yeah. My network is there. It's been there for a long time. A lot of people help me. So if I can help somebody else by just connecting them to someone else, okay, I think that goes a long way to helping somebody else's network.
All right, more questions. Let me go over here.
Hi, yeah. You had mentioned earlier that when you are making connections that you think a lot about what you want to get out of the relationship. So I am new to this mentoring stuff. I just graduated. What can you get out of a mentorship? What can you get out of your connections? That's been something that I've heard a lot of make connections, use your network. But when you don't have an understanding of where to go with it, it's a bit hard. So what should we be what should we be looking for and trying to go towards?
So have you decided on a career path?
Yeah, I'm trying to do energy engineering.
Okay. So I think what you ought to think about is, first of all, your area is a hot area. And engineers are, probably one of the most highly sought out individuals. I have a son who's an engineer. He's not in energy, he's in semiconductors, which is also equally as hot. But I think what you need to think about is where do you want to spend in that world, which is pretty broad? What do you really like, and what should you be exposed to? So you would go find whether it's someone from your school or someone in the industry. I would actually recommend someone in the industry that you can try to befriend and say, tell me about your career. I spent a lot of time when I was young talking to people saying, when you started your own company, because I truly did not know what the hell I was doing, trust me, okay? And I have had spectacular failures, okay, which I've recovered from, which the best thing that ever happened to me. But I think that you need to think through how to educate yourself in that world. What is it that you think you want to go to, and what do you learn about it? And then ask them, how do I either get involved in some way, whether it's an association, whether it's, I can volunteer resources to do X and Y to be able to do that. I think that would be a way that I would recommend that you do. Does that make sense?
And you also mentioned, I'm sorry, that you're a recent graduate. I'm presuming that somewhere along your university career, you may have come across professors who may have had the career that perhaps you are looking to achieve. And I think that could also be a good spin-off for you. I'm again going the professor academic route because, believe me, there's a lot to be mined there from people that you already know, especially if there's somebody who you particularly admire. Say, hey, listen, I really love how the career that you've built. I'm new at this, and they're going to know this. I mean, and a lot of them, I bet you, are going to be more than happy to say, hey, you know what, this is what I think you should do next. Perhaps you should meet this person, and perhaps you should focus on this. And that would hopefully give you, kind of like push you out of the nest, so to speak. That help? Great.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Over here. Yep, go ahead.
Did you have, go ahead.
No, there was, this side.
All right, I'm gonna go on that.
We're going to
Oh,
have equity here.
I'm gonna run over to you. Hold on 1 second. I can't run that fast in the heels, sorry. This attempt to look professional for me today, I'm usually in jeans and like sneakers, is really difficult, so there you go.
No worries. What makes you want to mentor someone? As somebody who reaches out to mentors and always has a little bit of, I'm bothering them, am I asking too much? What, in a mentoree, what stands out to you that makes you excited? I want to help this person. I want to have this conversation where they're not asking too much, but maybe they're staying in touch, the right cadence. I'm curious.
So
what makes
let
you wanna
me
help someone.
break down that question in two parts. First of all, when someone reaches out to me and they're genuine and they really want to have a conversation about what to do and how to mentor, I take it seriously, because when I was 19 years old, a lot of people did that for me. So I think I have to pay it forward. It's an ethic with me. I'm an immigrant. A lot of people stepped out. When I came over by myself as an unaccompanied 8-year-old, and a lot of people helped me out in my trajectory. So I think it's an ethic with me. I think if somebody wants your advice and help to get them to just have a conversation, I think I'm open to that, right? Where I then draw the line is where that conversation goes. If I meet with that person, I have the same exact conversation 4 times in a row where they haven't moved, it'll tell me that they're not really decided what they want to do. I would never say that I would waste my time. I would never say that you're wasting my time, because they may be enjoyable and may be a wonderful time, but how serious are they about wanting to do what they need to do, right? Some of my toughest conversations came from people, and my mentorships have changed all over. I mean, my company's 4 decades old, right? So in every decade, I have different people who helped me along the way and gave me really the advice that I needed at that time. I keep up, that's the other thing, I keep up with a lot of those people. Some of them are no longer with us, but even if I don't need anything from them now, I just want to make sure that I have that relationship. So I do it in 2 parts. One is, I do believe ethically that we should always pay it forward. And second of all, the second piece is, I really want to know what your real serious intent is. Because I have a friend, God bless her, she's adorable. I have talked to her about starting her own business now for 3.5 years. Has not happened. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't. I think she's got some inherent fears about this. My advice to her, go find a new job that makes you happy in some say and gives you enjoyment, but don't torture yourself by saying that if I don't start my own business, I've failed. Because that's not the metric that you should hold yourself to. So does that help? Okay.
You know, as a general proposition, and just something that I think about as I listen to Maria, is ultimately, in terms of mentorship and connections, I think you have to come to a point where you think about what type of life, what type of career do I want, and how am I going to get there? Do I know someone who has that life / career? And I think that would be the person, at least for me, that kind of guided who I wanted to seek out as a mentor. And I'll tell you that 9 times out of 10, people are going to be very happy to help you. I mean, I think most of the people who I've turned to for advice or mentorship, they've been all so gracious with their time, with their energy, with their advice. And most of the time, I think that's what you're going to find. And once you do find that person, and once you get yourself started and, you know, on the road to success, then the pay it forward, I think, is a must. I think it's almost like my own duty to do that because so many people did it for me, did it, you know, as I was coming up in my career. So I think that piece of advice is gold. I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to rope you into your own networking event. You didn't think you were going to come here and just sit in a chair. That's not how this game is played, folks. So I'm going to do one last question. I'm going to give it to this gentleman right here in the front.
Thank you. So I'm not sure if you'll have a great answer to this since you're an extrovert, but for me, it's always been less of an issue of what practically to do and more of an issue of overcoming emotional barriers from negative interactions. You know, I think introverts struggle with this especially. So do you have any insight on what sort of a mindset you might use to sort of push past, you know, worries about negative interactions or having them weigh heavily on you?
So, while you're correct, I'm not an introvert, but because of my trajectory in my career when I started, I entered a very male-dominated business, right? And so at times, there would be little cocktail parties where I was probably not only was I the only female in the room, but I was the only ethnic female in the room, right? And that was 40 years ago. And, you know, I was young. And the advances, the interaction at times was not pleasant. So you have to steel yourself for that, right? You had to sort of play. I sort of almost would create a scenario that with the worst case, because I knew maybe a couple of people were going to be there that I thought were kind of yucks, right? And I had to sort of play it in my mind of what was going to happen, what would be the worst case that could happen, and what would be my exit strategy, right, to be able to do that. I don't know if that helps you, but I think thinking it through, if you know a little bit of the context of what event you're going to be at or what situation you're going to be in, and sort of think it through ahead of time, don't just go blind, that helps in terms of being able to do that.
Thank you.
You know, I'll add to that and I'll say this, and the joke for me is at this point is get old. Once you get older, that starts mattering less. But that's not really helpful
That's
right
true.
now.
That is true.
This is not really helpful to you right now, but I will say this to you. There is no such thing as a finite number of people and connections that you can make, right? And just as in life, whether it's a friendship, a relationship, whatnot, there's going to be rejection along the way. It sucks. It never feels good. And when I think introverts kind of like take it a little bit more personally, at least I used to. And I think it's just time and perspective. The more people you know, the more the world widens, and you're going to be hearing a lot more yeses along the line. So hopefully that helped. Now, before I'm starting to get dirty looks from my administrators, so I need to move this along, guys. I hope you have found this helpful, and I hope we've given you some great takeaways today. But we're going to give you a chance to practice those takeaways because we are going to be doing a very 15 minutes, an interactive networking activity to apply what you have just learned. We will be playing a networking bingo. So in a moment, or as I speak, you are going to be provided with a bingo card with a grid of various networking objectives or challenges. And these are designed to encourage meaningful interactions and connections with fellow professionals. In other words, you're going to talk to people and you're going to get to know some people in this room. So essentially what you're going to do is do everything that's in one of those little squares, whether it's meeting someone from a different industry, whether it's introducing yourself to myself or Maria. Maria, did you know you're part of this bingo? Okay, now you know. And then when you successfully accomplish a task, ask the other person to kind of like just initial the square to prove that you did it. And then the first 2 people with all of the squares checked off and initialed, come and see. Apparently it's me. I've been recruited to be the person to collect these cards. First 2 people to complete all the tasks are going to win a prize. I'm not entirely sure what the prize is, but it's a prize. You'll like it, I'm sure. So have at it, folks. Practice. Get to know people. Spread the love.